Peace and respect to everyone who is here or watching this in the future. I want you to know that because of my beliefs in God and that you are a child of God, I love you. And I couldn't have said that when I was an anti-theist. I did not love you. I'm going to put, got the link in the chat there for you to come backstage and come on. And I'm going to pin that because this is somewhat kind of a continued conversation from Certainty Exists, JG. And we'll see who wants to hit that link and come in. I am going to ask, because there are now computers set up to search for StreamYard links, etc., and troll you or porn bomb you or whatever like that. I'm going to ask that if you come into the back the StreamYard, you have a camera. It doesn't matter the quality whatsoever, but I'm going to ask you to activate your camera in StreamYard link. And I'm going to ask you to do something specific to show that you are the human you claim to be. And it's going to be something weird that like you couldn't get film footage of. Like I would ask Nerdy Rodent to turn on his camera and say touch his right index finger to his left eyebrow. You know, nothing rude, just something you'd never get film footage of. You just couldn't find somebody doing that quick enough. And then if you want, you can go back to icon and I will bring you in. Of course, if you want to have camera on stream, that's fine too. More than accepting of that. It helps us to understand each other's facial expressions when we're trying to communicate complex and nuanced ideas of what we think is true. Those things are very complicated and difficult, of course. And I just got my first alert that there's someone backstage. Let's see who it is. We got Mr. James. It is Mr., isn't it? James Apperson, peace and respect.
Yeah, it is Mr., and thanks for asking.
Okay. Peace and respect to everyone. Red Pill Matrix, Peter W., Nerdy Rodent, and of course, Halcyonic Kaiju, which is very difficult to say with this mouth.
Yeah, fair.
Okay, so I wouldn't mind picking up where you dropped off or where JG had to leave his channel and just continuing from there. So, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that. He felt like I was wandering way off topic into territory that he couldn't see any relevance to. Okay. I knew I was kind of off topic, but I thought the relevance was obvious. He didn't think it was, and if I'd have known that we were on borrowed time, I would have made much briefer points. I had no idea.
Well, this stream may go as much as 5 or even 6 hours from this moment in time space, and we'll just have to see how it goes. But I don't feel pressured for time whatsoever. My channel tends to attract people on average that have some amount of self-control and can be respectful to each other. So the ball is in your court. The floor is yours.
Oh, I appreciate that. And you know, I really try to be respectful of other people. I don't always succeed, and I'm not always. You know this.
Really?
Yes, really. Like it's obvious, but I'm saying it anyways, right? So I've not always been completely fair with Richard, and Richard's been graceful enough to just let that go. And I've not always been fair with Peter W., and nor has Peter W. necessarily always been fair with me. But we move past it, right? Like, we're not holding grudges. We're just, here we are. It is what it is. I know a lot of people in the chat, too, Nerdy Rodent. In fact, I was watching a Nerdy Rodent video earlier today. Brilliant person. Like, holy crap, they're smart. Let me think. I know Peter W., of course. I know you. I know Kata. I was surprised to see Kata in here briefly. Are they
Peace
still
and
here?
respect,
I'm not
Kata.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. So yeah. So that's where I'm at. So we were talking about morality and what we base our morality on, and whether or not why it matters. And I never finished making the point about why my morality matters.
If you recall what that is, the floor is yours.
So my morality matters because my morality is an expression of what I care about. So by definition, it automatically matters to me. And this is kind of what the drunk guy in the previous channel was trying to say. I don't remember his name. Like I don't want to keep calling him the drunk guy. I just can't remember his name.
Could I give you an assignment of identifier as David?
David. There we go, David. This is what David was trying to say. So here's the thing. The reason I feel like other people should give a damn about what my morality is because if they care enough about it to learn enough about it, then they'll understand the paradigm from which I'm working. And the better they understand the paradigm from which I am working, the better equipped they will be in order to navigate me as an agent in their social landscape. They'll be better equipped to understand where I'm coming from, where I'm going, with what momentum, with what attitude, what I care about. And so they'll have some pretty good indicators about what responses to expect based on which behaviors they themselves choose. And so as a practical point of reference, that automatically gives even the most fundamentalist religious person a reason to care about what my morality is, even if they don't share it, and vice versa, right? So even if I'm not going to agree with a religious fundamentalist moral structure, I'll know, one, that we probably have some things in common, maybe even more than we have different. And two, even if we don't have a lot in common, I need to know where I stand with them. I need to have some way to gauge my expectations in order to plan around them and plan with them, so that I know like what kind of response I'll get if I say and do this versus if I say and do that, because their responses are going to matter to me. The responses are going to matter to me for a couple of different reasons. One, I care how it affects me. Two, I care how it affects others. And three, I care how it affects them. Like, I'm not going through life looking for a chance to make other people feel a bad way if I can avoid that. I don't want someone to feel intimidated or threatened or devalued or anything else, right? I want them to feel seen and heard and understood as much as possible, even if I don't agree. And so I have all these considerations, and so that gives me plenty of reason to care about what their morality is, why so it matters in that context, because I kind of need to know what it is. And then in the larger context, it matters because we live in a society of interconnected parts and agents, right? And so every moment of positive or negative energy I put out into the social ecosystem will have a real impact, a butterfly effect at the very least, and sometimes a very dramatic immediate effect on the world in which we live. And if I affect one person in any way, functionally or emotionally, then that's going to, in turn, affect how they interact with their world, which will then have effects on other people as well. It's a ripple effect. So, in the meantime, I want to live in the safest possible society. And the safer the society, then the safer I am, and the safer other people are that I care about. I happen to care about everybody, but even if I only cared about a few people, this remains true. I want them to live in the safest setting possible because I don't want to see them come to harm. Well, in order to achieve this goal, this rational goal, I need to do my part as much as I can to be a good player in that field. I need to make sure that I bring words and attitudes and actions into the mechanism that we're all tied into with each other, that increase the functionality and the safety of the system that we're all plugged into. Because if I do something that makes the system less safe for anybody, then I will automatically be making the system less safe for me and for other people that I am invested in. And these are practical. Yeah, these are practical considerations that don't require any predispositions in the sense that Jay was saying. Like I'm not assuming it works that way. I've seen it work that way, and I understand how it works that way.
Hmm.
So the assumptions aren't on that level. The assumptions are on a meta level. The assumptions I make are whether or not my memories are reliable, right? Because my memories inform my understanding of physics, including social physics. So if my memories aren't reliable, then I'm not correctly gauging social physics. And if I'm not correctly gauging social physics, then I might have a bad understanding of the way that my attitudes and actions and choices in the world will affect other people in the system that I'm part of. But because I only have the memories that I have to rely on them. I don't have any other memories I can rely on. Right? That's the point I was trying to make with Jay. My memories
Hmm.
aren't infallible. They are very fallible, but I don't have access to anybody else's. So when I'm assessing the probabilities of consequence to my actions and my attitudes, I'm drawing from a set of understandings that are fallible, but they're the only ones I have access to. So I'll open the floor to whatever feedback you want to give me about that, but this is the point that I was trying to make with Jay, but we ran out of time.
Yeah, no, no, I understand. Yeah, he was kind of pressed. He had other things he wanted to try to do. No, I don't see any reason why I would give pushback to that. That seems valid in reality and in application, and it seems like you did a pretty good job of describing why. So actually, I have no pushback to that. I also think it's not the conversation. Um, but in an internal critique of everything you just said, I'd say big thumbs up, man. Awesome.
I appreciate that. So, in what way is it not the conversation? I just want to hear you expand on that.
I think that there was implied accusation in the original conversation and implied demands for justification uh, and grounding of the morality beyond just application and why a person thinks these things are true in reality, and beyond why they think they work, and why they should adopt certain attitudes about social behaviors and personal subjective morality, or unless you think that wasn't implicit.
You mean that he was expecting from me or wanting to get from me?
Yes, some kind of an objective, because this is where the conversation. I mean, we all know these arguments, right, James?
Yeah, we do.
That where the conversation goes ends up eventually is how do you ground this in reality?
Right.
And you spoke
So,
a lot about your interpretation and application, and I agree with all of that.
so how I grounded in reality. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Because part of my consideration is based on things like compassion and empathy and
Hmm.
personal accountability, if I'm talking to a sociopath, those aren't part of their paradigm. Their brain can't process those states of being. It's just not. They just can't. And that's not a moral failing. Again, that's just a physical limit. So if I'm going to try to convince them that they should adopt a certain set of social behaviors and priorities or values being just what we value, right? Like, I would rather this than that kind of a thing. If I'm going to try to convince them of this, it makes no sense to try to appeal to them based on compassion or empathy or anything else that they can't process. Instead, what I would
Hmm.
do, there was this well known case of a scientist, and I always forget his name, but I've used him as an
Okay.
example. Used him as an example before. He was running a case study for psychopaths because they're
Hmm.
trying to figure out how much of psychopathy is measurable in the human brain and how predictive that is for certain behaviors and things like that. It's a comprehensive case study to better understand and catalog psychopathy better. And
Okay.
so there was this series of brain scans that he had to separate into two groups. There was a control group, obviously, and then there was actual psychopaths in the group as well. And they weren't labeled in front with their names; they're just labeled with
Because that would be
like
biased.
right. So it needs to be a blind study, and so it's proper science, right? So he came across this one scan that he looked at and he's like, holy crap, I know which pile this goes in. This guy is clearly an extreme psychopath. This might be one of the most pronounced scans I've seen.
Yeah.
And he thought that was interesting, and he really wanted to know who it was, but he couldn't ask right up front. Like, he had to wait till later to find out.
Of course, you have to wait, yeah.
Right. So when he was finally able to find out, it was his own brain scan that he entered as part of the control group, assuming he wasn't a psychopath. And this led to a series of discoveries where he realized, oh crap, that's why I feel these ways and reason these ways and act these ways when people piss me off. No wonder. And he's like,
that's a scientific success right there.
Yes. And so this was paradigm shifting for him, because it was like, oh shit. I mean, what? I'm a monster? Like, and then he had to put it in perspective. He's like, well, it's not really about that, right? It's like, it's just a condition. It's just a physiology and how that kind of feeds certain kinds of responses to certain kinds of situations. And
how I process others. Yeah.
Yes, right. And so what he realized is, upon realizing that he has this particular disorder or physiology, is that if he doesn't start behaving better, if he doesn't find a reason to behave better, he's lucky. So far, he hadn't lost his job. So far, he hadn't lost his marriage. So far, he hadn't lost all of his friends. But man, he's walked a razor's edge on those relationships for quite some time, because it's always been about what he can get away with, because he tends to overreact to everything. He wants to hurt people that hurt him. And so what he realized is that he's going to have to make some changes if he wants to make sure he doesn't lose those things in his life. And he had a heart-to-heart, like a deep conversation with his coworkers and his family members and his wife and all these other people. And what they came up with was this, that at least he's self-aware enough to understand cause and effect on a social and a societal level. At least he realizes he doesn't want to lose the benefits that come with being in a marriage and having a job and having family and friends he can call if he ends up in a bind, right?
Fair enough.
And so what he decided was he was going to adopt a higher standard of pro-social behavior, a reliably high standard of pro-social behavior, because now everybody's looking at him and paying closer attention to his behaviors. He probably can't get away with the same things he could get away with before, because they'll be watching him now. And really, besides that, he's like, I would have lost these relationships eventually anyways. And he didn't want to. He didn't want to lose the benefits. And so he struck a deal with all these people, including his wife. And his wife's like, look, I realize you can't feel for me the same way that I can feel about you, because you process things differently. She said, but if you can behave like someone who does, if you can hold to a certain set of behaviors that husbands should normally do for their wives, then I'll stay with you. And he did. And so even though she knows his heart isn't in it in the way she wishes it could be, she's invested in him, and she appreciates that he's made these changes. And so now he behaves a lot more considerately. He does things for her that are more fair, equitable, thoughtful than he did before. Sure. And so if I was going to appeal to somebody who processes things differently, psychologically, emotionally, and I want them to adopt what we're calling morals. And again, I don't really love the word very much, but we'll use it. If I want somebody to adopt my morals, then I have to appeal to them based on whatever they have resonance with, whatever matters to them. And if what matters to them is simply their own selfish benefits, I can work with that. That's not a problem. Right? So I can just tell him, like, look, okay, you don't feel a certain way. I'm not going to, morally judge you for that. No point in it, right? Because nobody chooses to not be able to process things a certain way. So here's what's going to happen to you in life, not from me, but just in life in general, if you don't adopt and maintain a certain pro-social standard. You're going to end up losing all these benefits that come with durable social relationships, friends, family, coworkers, bosses, clients, your wife, etc. Right? So you have to decide if you want the benefits of being selfish, or if you want the benefits of being more equitable. You have to recognize the cause and effect, the costs, and decide for yourself if those costs are worth it or not. Now, if they're very thoughtfully aware of what the costs really are, most sociopaths and psychopaths would say, okay, yeah, you're right. I'm going to start behaving in a more pro-social way, right? And so this is why morality matters. This is why their morality matters, why my morality matters, because it's about cause and effect. And we just have to be aware of that. So underneath that, in big part, is emotional considerations. We want certain things. We don't want other certain things because we're very carrot and stick responsive. That's just deeply embedded in who we are. We want benefits and we don't want detriments, right? We don't want to suffer, but we do want pleasure. So with that being the case, something that we all have in common, we can all work within the context and say, okay, we all want benefits. Let's talk about how to get and give those equitably across the board so that everybody's is a flowing river of benefits everybody can drink from when they're thirsty. Right. Let's see if we can create that kind of a society so that we all have a river to drink from tomorrow.
Or better still, create this river that everyone drinks from constantly and no one is ever thirsty.
Right, exactly, and that's why it matters. So that's where I was trying to go with it on Jay's channel, and I just didn't get a chance to finish making that point. But did I neglect something? Is there something else you meant to ask or that you were looking for?
Of course, that's why it's a conversation. Yeah, nope, fair. The end of the show. Okay, everybody have a great day. Bye. No, not at all, not at all.
Right, I just meant like in your previous question, if I rambled so long that I forgot something you had asked me is all I meant.
No, I think everything was well addressed, but really what I think you did was expound on your original statement. And I appreciate the depth of it. I'm not dismissing your explanation. Not at all. Okay, so from within that framework, don't you also have to say those who have not gotten to the doctor's point where they saw their own brain on a chart and assessed it as such, before they get to that point, before they understand that they are suffering from psychopathy or what have you, whatever non-average expression of mind and brain, okay?
Sure.
And we're all non-average. Every single, I just want to say, all of us are non-average.
Right. We're all unique.
Yeah, we're all absolutely unique.
We're also variable.
Nuanced ways. What's that?
We're also variable. We're also variable.
Can change.
Yep, yes. From moment to moment, hour to hour, depending on our diet and our exercise and our sleep and quantity and quality and recent experiences and experiences we haven't yet had. So we are very dynamic. In that
okay,
way,
now you're going on.
Sorry.
You're going on in the middle of what I was trying to ask you.
Sorry.
Don't you then? It's okay. I love you. I'm just saying that you're aware that you do that, and you're not embarrassed. You admit that you do that. I'm just pointing out that you did that. Okay. Yeah. Not that I'm really objecting. I just want the conversation to go forward.
Sure.
I mean, if we weren't, if we were just sitting over a dinner table having dinner right now, I'd just keep going with it.
Right.
I would.
Right. Now you know how Jay felt.
But not in this scenario right now. No. I want to understand more instead of repeating what you've already said. Okay.
Sure.
So before the doctor saw his own chart, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was in a state where he didn't know, he literally could not know that he was in that state. Why? Because he was in that state, he could not know he was in that state.
Right. That's brilliant.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so in the things you've said, and I don't want to assume, I want to ask, does that mean that until it's discovered by the doctor that the rest of society needs to have taken his unusual function into consideration, and that he is also not liable for it in that moment, pre-discovery?
So Jay touched on this a little bit, and I'm glad we're talking about it more. In terms of what society should do, I think it's a little bit different than what an individual should do.
Okay.
So, because society can't think in real time as a collective. So society updates and kind of ripple effect, and right. So an individual encountering somebody like that scientist before he knew he was a psychopath, their considerations would really be the same as mine and yours, right? It's a matter of practicality. Once you have a certain experience with somebody where they respond in a way that's antithetical to your best interest, and you recognize it as such. It
Mm-hmm.
makes sense to then reassess that situation to say, okay, I either need to accept that kind of consequence in dealing with this person, or find a way to deal with this person where I'm not evoking those consequences, or quit dealing with this person. I've got choices to make. And so it's all a matter of cost versus benefit analysis, in a fallible sort of way, because our brain simply works the way that it works. And sometimes we have a sunk cost fallacy, for example. We might continue to deal with somebody we probably shouldn't because we've already invested in them. And some people are just vulnerable to that. It's one of the reasons why I wish elementary education included a comprehensive education about logical fallacies, so that people could think more reasonably as adults.
I
But
believe it
but
used to.
well, it needs to again then, because I know that my
Yeah,
education sure didn't. I could have
mine either.
benefited from it, right?
My mom's
So,
my mom's did, however, she told me of it.
oh, all right. Well, they should bring that back if they haven't already, because it sure would have saved me a lot of grief in life. Because I spent so many years reasoning so fallaciously because I was trained to reason fallaciously, and
Yes.
it cost me a lot. So an
Yes.
individual only has what they have to work with. So if an individual is dealing with a psychopath, then all they can do is the best they can do, and probably they're going to make some mistakes. But if they wanted my advice, I would say, here's your three options. Think carefully, because you're
Right.
responsible for your choices. He's responsible for his, but you're responsible for yours. And so if you continue to knowingly deal with somebody who is dangerous,
Hmm.
then you're going to have to accept the consequences that come with the fact that you're dealing with somebody you know is dangerous. So you've got to make that choice and then own it, right? When things go badly a second time and a third time and a fourth time, it's more and more your fault too, because you're the one that kept dealing with that person. So, and on those terms, right? So choices. That's all I can tell people. You got choices. Be mindful of what those choices are. Be mindful of the risks you're taking. Beyond that, be prepared to own the consequences for whatever choice you make. That's all I can tell them. So, moving forward from there, I just think that the world is just a great big onion, because that's what Nerdy Rodent says it is. Um, Remind me what the question is. I'm sorry, Richard.
Okay, I was asking of responsibilities of the individual and their direct and larger community when that person has an other than average processing of something or reaction to something.
Right, right. So it's important that we not assess people based on what we hope or what we expect, based on what we would do in their shoes, because they're not us. We just can't. If we go through life just assuming everybody thinks like us and then being really really surprised when it doesn't work out that way, we're gonna end up with making an awful lot of bad choices.
Well,
We,
maybe we should lower our expectations, but it's not okay. So it is, and this is what you're saying essentially. If we break it down into a typical logical fallacy, that it you can expect, because these things continue to work, i.e., several people in a row were able to understand my emotional states from what I'm saying and how I'm saying it, and act appropriately to my actual states. And when that happens several times in a row, it's not unreasonable. You can say, "Oh, I have good evidence for that. It will continue in other people in like manner." But
right.
then you do run into the anomalous person who does not process whatever states you're in correctly, understanding them correctly, because
Mm-hmm.
of so I'm going to say literally abnormality in them compared to the median human being. And you would be surprised, but even the surprise is predictable,
Mm-hmm.
and we should be able to say, okay, on average, 99% of the time this seems to work, but then you're going to run into that 1 in 100 and it's not going to work. But
Right.
all of that's completely reasonable.
Yeah. every time we assess situations and expectation, we're doing a statistical analysis. Maybe it's a shallow one, maybe it's a deep one, maybe it's well-informed, maybe it's not, but we're always doing that statistical analysis of probable outcomes, and then making choices based on our estimation of the probabilities.
Right.
And so life's learning experience, we get better and better at that as we go, as long as we're taking careful notes. But, it's also about protecting ourselves, too. And so if we have to also be wary of the fact, or very mindful of the fact, that we're taking certain risks in certain situations. If the risks are high, if this person, depending on what they do, could really hurt us in our life, then we need to make sure that we have a very high standard of expectation from the individual, not from statistics. We have to have a reason to think that that individual, no matter how well we do or don't think we know them, that there's safeguards in place that make it a low-risk proposition. And we need to also know...
on average... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, on average what?
I think on average people do exactly what you're describing. I mean, at least people who are... have function in some median range of normal human function do exactly these things. That is relationship building. That you just said relationship building, and what is reasonable and unreasonable relationship building. And you can tell if someone is not rational enough and withheld enough, or has not been hurt by their mistakes, and judging too fast someone else, and perhaps extending too much trust or distrust, and how that can ruin relationships because of their past experiences. And I think that is because all of us start out with an example of one or two, those being the parental units, and then that group expands to maybe you get some siblings or small friend groups. Say you're beginning small friend groups, say preschool. Something like that, and that expands and expands and expands. So you start with a really, really small sample group, and it's the most influential sample group because it's not about logic, it's about perception. And children don't have logic; they only have perception. So that perhaps parental group is overvalued in the whole. If that seems reasonable to you.
It does. And this is where the primary presuppositions come from in the human experience. Even if a person ends up religious, their primary presuppositions don't come specifically from the religion. They come from their parental units, because we don't start off as these critical faculty people. We start off as these presumptive, trusting, barely self-aware agents in the world.
Sure.
So it's formative, and so we end up with this larger than life figure and then there's another, and they slowly come into focus day after day. They're slightly more clarified within our visual lens and our perceptual lens and our ability to comprehend things. And it's such a gradual process that none of it's necessarily jarring. And we're utterly dependent on these mysterious parental figures, because they are our protectors and our teachers and our providers. And at first it's just all instinctual, and that instinctual response gradually becomes more and more a matter of cognition, more and more a matter of processing things. And so this actually sets the initial wiring that people are responding to if they're receptive to religiosity later in life. It's that latent wiring that's wired in there from our experiences with these mysterious figures that gradually come into focus, and that we have this utter dependence on. And so later in life, certain experiences, if that wiring is still prominent within our psychology, then our responses to things like hope and fear and need can be really, really responsive to the promise of religions and to the narrative and to the culture and to the relationships of religion, and that makes it very real for us. So there may be there are presuppositionalist fundamentalists that suppose that their primary presupposition is God, but their primary presupposition is not God, it's parent. And from there, as we move further into adulthood, they can transfer their presuppositions into a surrogate parent that they know is God. And I'll even grant the idea, just for the sake of argument, that a God exists, that there is this super parent in the sky, I'll just grant it for the sake of argument, because the point is still the same. They're transferring that trust, that presupposition, that primary foundation of their perception of reality from the initial parents into this parental surrogate, even if that surrogate happens to be a literal entity that existed before the universe. That's still what they're doing with it. And I'm okay with that. Go ahead.
If you think there's an intrinsic human nature that we are going to, and by the way, all of that you just said, and some of it relatively nuanced, was still perfectly coherent within a materialistic view. I just want you to know I noticed that you are being consistent.
Awesome.
But if it's our natural tendency, because the way the human brain processes things, that we transfer the idea of this seen through a smoky mirror parental thing into our adulthood, tell me how it is that you think that it's possible that on average, if that's our tendency, how people without some kind of, literally would have to be considered a dysfunction, do not do that and are absolutely skeptical. How are they skeptical?
So here's the thing. No matter if we're working from having our biological parents over us as our presuppositional source, or the transferred super parent in the sky, the goal of any good parent and any child with a future, the goal should be to outgrow the dependency, to mature into a state where, even though the parent is still recognized as existing, that we are these autonomous adults in the world who, even if we can really rely on the parent, even if we're convinced that we have a real relationship with them, even for the sake of argument we do, the idea of moving into adulthood is needing to make that phone call, that 3 a.m. phone call saying, I'm lost, I'm confused, I'm struggling, help me figure this out, I need to draw from your knowledge and your wisdom. That phone call should happen less and less often as an adult. That should be the goal, to ever increase our autonomous predisposition and approach to life, to say, to earn our own confidence and our own ability to get ourselves out of tough situations, and to mutually bond with people who are earning our reciprocal trust in having each other's back, because we can't always provide entirely like our own, for ourselves. We can't always provide for ourselves. Sometimes we need somebody else to help pull our truck out of a ditch, or to be a sounding board, or whatever it is we need. So, people always talk about how it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to sustain an adult too. We're just social creatures in that way. And so this, I don't necessarily have an opinion about whether or not somebody decides that a God doesn't exist. My position is, I'm just going to assume that a super entity in the sky does exist, and they've got a parental nature, and that you have a parental relationship with them. I'm not even going to waste any time telling you I don't think they exist, because what do I know, right? It's, if you perceive it, maybe it's there. I don't perceive it. What can I do about it, right? And I'm okay with not perceiving it. The thing is that I want to encourage people to recognize that the role of a good father is to want their child to outgrow their dependencies, to become more and more autonomous. And that's what religions tend to strongly discourage in their sheep.
You just totally failed. You just totally failed because you made the religious practitioner the religion. That's a failure.
Expand on that for me.
Okay, let's say you got a preacher. Okay. Is the preacher say he's a Christian, say some specific Christian, does he necessarily have an objective understanding of what, say, the Bible is trying to portray?
No two people have ever read the same book.
Right. Okay. So if you know that, then you have to know that they're seeing it through through their quote unquote heart and through their mind and the way that they see it, and because religion is lacking usage of the scientific method of knowing whether or not a thing is true, which I believe I do. apply the scientific method to these religious stories. To eliminate as much of my own biases as possible, but that's not normal. In fact, it's absolutely discouraged that you do that. They call that doctrine. No, you stay to the doctrine. So the preacher no more has an objective view of what the Bible is trying to teach than some other preacher or a practitioner or anything like that. So if you were saying that the story of the Bible, for instance, not that it's the only story, but if you're saying that the story of the Bible dictates that a person should do or should believe these certain things, then I need it shown logically beyond a shadow of a doubt. I mean, it's okay if there's a light shadow. That's all right. But I need it to be shown that the text is, as close to objectively as we can, recommending those things. Because a preacher can say anything from within their view about the text. It doesn't make it true of the text.
I actually agree with you 100%. Man, I was so prepared to disagree with you. I'm like, he's going to say something. Yeah. Gosh darn it.
Sorry to disappoint. No, I'm a realist, I think. That if you don't apply the scientific method, and I think it's closest actually to forensic science, to the text of the Bible, then you can't see it through a clean, as unbiased as possible lens. You can't.
Sure. And with that, and I agree with you 100%. Now, the caveat that I would throw in there is, I don't think anybody can get as close as I think they're getting. You know, when I listen to the Myth Vision experts that they have on there, I don't know how often you watch Myth Vision. I'm not sure. But you know, all right. So, right. So when I listen to them, it's interesting because they have so many different views, but their views are highly academic, and they've spent decades like weighing historical evidences and sifting through things and trying to refine their ideas, and they get so much confidence from this. But the problem is they're each mutually confident, and they don't agree on everything. In fact, sometimes so,
same problem with the church fathers. Go ahead.
Right, and so atheists or non-religious skeptics have the same problem. No two people have ever read the same book. And so, realizing this, I'm like, I don't even know that my understanding of a given passage or a book or whatever is a good representation of the ideas that the writers meant to convey. I really don't know that it is.
Okay, so I think the exercise is, with all pieces of literature, to first of all assess them. Okay. Yeah. Because obviously you don't just pick up Goldilocks and the Three Bears, take it at face value, and say, "Yep, that's a fact." That would be a very non-adult thing to do. That's something a 6-year-old does. Right. And it's fine when you're 6 and you've got someone else to care for you, but when you need to be a well-adjusted adult, you can't keep doing that. You'll have too many failures, and you'll probably end up dead if you keep it up. Okay, so let's start with a clean slate and say, okay, here's some words on paper. Let's just say that. There's words on paper. Let's see if it has value. And how do we know if something has value or not, and start right there. Well, first of all, if something has contextual changes constantly and it doesn't specifically say that it's changing it, then there's no way to say that it's coherent within itself. In other words, you can make nothing of it and you can make anything of it, and either way is horrible.
Right. One of the great paradoxes, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so the first thing a written word needs to be is coherent within itself. Mm-hmm. The next thing is that it not only needs to be coherent within itself, it needs to be submissive to at least classical logic. Like if it says that a thing is also not that thing in the same way at the same time in the same space, then it's obviously not true.
I'll grant that.
And you should not accept it. All right? And then beyond that, does it make sense to you personally compared to your experience? Like, does it seem that in its more nuanced levels, that okay, that hasn't been my experience, that's not true in reality, and if it's not true in reality, you have to now say that it's a fiction, okay, because it could be coherent within itself, and it could be logically sustainable, but it still could be a fiction. Okay,
Sure.
so maybe you found a piece of fiction. Now, so if it works with your understanding of reality, limited as we are, but it seems to make sense against the actuality that you experience, then maybe you can say, well, maybe this is not a fiction. And then the next step to say is, okay, if it's maybe not a fiction, does it actually comport to the actual reality? In a most objective way that we can understand what reality is. Like, does it try to defeat physics? Well, if it
Right.
defeats physics, it doesn't comport to reality. There's no correspondence there, and you have to go back to it's a fiction. That's good so far?
Yeah, I would just add the clarifier: a reality as we know it, a reality as we perceive it, or a reality
Yeah.
as we experience it.
No,
Because
I already said that.
yeah, right, right. That's
Okay,
yeah, you did
okay,
earlier,
so
so we're good.
yeah, okay, so the next step then is to say, like a scientific theory, say about in forensic science, trying to find the criminal when the criminal is not there on the scene to be identified.
Right.
What? Okay, so what you're looking for is guilt, and you're looking
Okay.
for opportunity, right? And you're looking for predictive power from within what you do have on the scene, right? So on the
Right.
scene meaning in the text here. Can we assign ideas of guilt based on what we see in the scene? And in the case of religious stories, there's always a guilt context. That is, guilty of doing something good or guilty of doing something bad, but there's definitely the overall idea of liability or responsibility. I'm going to just say guilt for now, although I love to use words slightly out of context that way to make people open up their brains.
Sure.
You
Sure.
can be guilty of a good thing.
Right.
Because you can.
That's like
Uh,
the phrase, "Are you threatening me with a good time?" It's just
yes, right,
yeah. Right.
precisely.
Yeah.
Or my next eldest brother used to say, that stinks good. Um, talking about dinner or what have you.
Right.
I mean, yes, use the word that way. Open up your mind. Quit being so staunch in your social structures and try to use your brain, which is what he
Absolutely.
was overall trying to say.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what we would hope for, and probably one of the best things that confirm I'm going to or support a hypothesis, making it into a theory, is one of the things that support it is its predictive power. Does it have predictive power within the accepted all the rest of the steps that we've already been through to assess a piece of literature? Does it tell me something about reality that is not within my experience, i.e., it's not my bias, but it indicates that if A and B, then C, and I go and I look for C, and C is from outside of my experience, yet I find C, that's falsifiability, that's predictive power, and now it's been confirmed. We good?
Yep.
Okay, so far so good. And this is actually what I use, and I try to use it the best I can. Now, again, anytime there's a failure, you have to defer back to the last step. And ultimately, we're trying to disprove this thing, not prove this thing. Of course, if you try to prove a thing true, then you're going to exercise biases hidden to yourself, and what you're going to end up with is an inaccurate result and assessment, right?
Right. A common fundamentalist mistake.
Yes. Don't get me started, man.
Right.
Do not
Right.
get me started. I can go on forever
Fair.
about that. I mean, I will not be able to stop.
Right.
Because
Right.
just there's so many fundamental assumptions about reality, not using any form of assessment within fundamentalism. I'll just
Right.
stop right there if I can.
Right. Right.
Okay. So then, if it has predictive power from outside of the experimental, I'm going to say experimenters' experience, then that's a good indication that it, especially if you have several of those, that it's not just a hypothesis. It becomes then a theory because it's been well confirmed.
Sure.
Okay, that's it. I'm saying you can get to theory from a piece of literature. But the overall objective should be to disprove it as reality and show that it is fiction.
Sure.
Or inconsequential personal experience, like a private love letter or something like that.
Right. So, I mean, I appreciate all of that. Now, I rather doubt that I'll ever know enough about ancient religious history, because it's not enough of a passion for me to accumulate enough knowledge to develop really, really confident positions about exactly what they most certainly did or didn't do, did or didn't say, what they really meant by it.
Pause, hold the thought. You good?
Yep.
Just hold on to it, okay? Backstage, we have Mark Reed, supposedly. Mark, can you just flip your camera on and off just so I know it's actually you? And can you raise your left hand? Can you do that for me, Mark? Okay. We'll bring you in. Thank you, Mark.
Awesome. Hi, Mark.
How are you? Turn your camera back off if you prefer, or whatever.
Yeah, how long have you been following us, Mark?
Just for a little bit. I wanted to add something to what Richard was saying, but go ahead. And I'll chime in, James. You know me, I can't shut up for too long.
I don't have anything yet, so it's just whenever Richard wants to have you pull in.
Okay, so I was saying that there is assessment for literature.
I do like your methodology so far, but I think it misses a couple of steps, because what you're basically describing is a scientific, a general broad view of the scientific methodologies, essentially.
Teach me.
Well, the part that you missed off the end is replication and peer review, or sharing it with others and letting them get the same result. So you have this idea in science when doing this analysis is sort of robustness.
Right.
And robustness is sort of being able for anybody to do exactly the same thing and get the same result, which is why we have scientific consensus. So it sort of says, well, if all of these people agree on the same thing, it's most likely that's the answer.
No, I totally agree. I hadn't gotten to it, but I think you're completely right.
Yeah, well, and at that point, it sort of becomes theory. So I was just sort of chiming in. Well, yeah, there's sort of a really important step of sort of sharing the knowledge around, and that happens in all science, whether it's engineering or the theoretical sciences, etc.
No, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. Maybe I, along that whole chain, used the word confirmation, but it's not. I hadn't even gotten to confirmation of a theory. I was just using the word theory. I don't think the theory at that point had been confirmed. Is it too soon? Are you telling me it's too soon to use the word theory there?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's fine. I can live with that.
No, it depends on what kind of theory that you're talking about. If you're just talking about the colloquial use of it, that's fine. Just a hypothesis can be a theory, sure. But if you're talking about sort of a scientific theory, it has to go through the process of other people confirming what you've seen. Sure. And that's the second step, like you were talking about eliminating confirmation bias before. That's the second step in eliminating confirmation bias. And we don't do nearly enough replication studies. Like, we really need to do more of that.
Well, we only have so much time.
Well, yeah, and resources, and actually the major problem is that replication studies are basically not as sexy as finding something out for yourself, right? Because it's going to be the person that originally did the experiments to get all of the credit.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, they're going to be the ones to be celebrated. Hey, they discovered this, and so the person coming along replicating it to confirm it is probably not going to get the same level.
I want to defend that we do more of that than is perceived, and I think even a high school chem teacher, if they got a result that they shouldn't get, and they kept getting that result and tried to eliminate variables, and they would report that. So I think it get kind of relegated down from them at the top of their field, down into those toward the bottom of the field, down into colleges, down into high school. But even a junior high science teacher, if they got some repeated, confirmable, long-term result that did not agree with the present paradigm, they'd report that up the chain.
Oh, absolutely. And for the foundational stuff, that's absolutely true. The experiments have been done like a bazillion times, kind of thing. I'm more talking about the more sort of, the more fringe stuff that people are doing, like effects of, coffee on the bloodstream and, all of this kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect system, but it's the best we've got. I don't know of a better system. That's the thing. Like,
right. No, I value the system. If you can't tell that, okay, not perfect. Fine.
Right.
Fine. We have to say there are axiomatic presuppositions that we have to hold to in order to go forward as if. And I have no problem with that, even though you could argue that fundamentally there is some axioms that have to be exercised and assumed, but I have no problem with that because I want to go forward as a human being too. Okay,
right.
And maybe that's self-centric, but I'm just going to move forward as if these things should be assumed.
Well, everybody kind of agrees more or less on the major presuppositions that we're using, like, for instance, empiricism, and
Sure.
that your senses are generally correct. Everybody kind of agrees on it. They may have different reasons for it to be true, but everyone kind of agrees that it's true. Like, some of the presuppositionalist theists will sort of say, hey, it's because God has revealed it or whatever, but they still agree that the senses are true. So with presuppositions, it doesn't really matter. As long as we all agree that they are correct, it's not really a problem.
Right. So long as we're making as few of them as possible.
Right. You want to keep that at a base level, like so make as few assumptions as humanly possible, because as soon as you start assuming more and more complex things, the chance of them being wrong is a whole lot higher. So
right on.
Try to make the very fewest assumptions you can and then work from there. But this whole problem with presuppositions or axioms basically is that everybody has to have them. You can't, you can't assume that, for instance, the laws of logic, you were talking about that earlier, sort of where you get base logic, you have to assume they're correct, or else you just can't progress. You can't communicate.
Yeah. Okay,
I don't
cool.
know if that's a flaw of our communication or a flaw of the way that we think, but that seems to be the case. We just have to use them. There's no other way around it, or at least none that I've seen.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I would never appeal to any god or gods as justification for those axioms, because I don't think we need to, and that's an unnecessary assumption, which is defeating of what an axiom is.
Right, exactly. And the whole thing that the presuppositional theists will make you do is say, well, you've got to come up with an origin point of these things, and sort of where they come from, and the old, what's foundational to everything. And the whole point is that you don't. As long as you agree on these foundations, there's no problem there. You can just say, hey, as long as we all agree, we can move forward as if we knew 100% they were true.
Right. Okay. Point of governance. Guys, please try to remember to vote on. I'm not asking you to vote up or down, because I'm not. Be you, but please remember to vote before you go.
Vote what?
On the video.
Oh, likes and dislikes.
Yes, please.
Vote on the video. Okay. Well, I mean, I like myself, so and I like you guys. So.
I was in it. 5 stars.
Hey man, if you're not gonna upvote yourself, who are you gonna upvote, right?
I'm telling you.
Seriously.
True.
Oh my gosh, and that leads me directly into the question, why should I believe that my view of reality, which I know must be flawed, is an objective view and assume that I'm right? And this is the most offensive thing that I see the theistic person doing.
Wait, back up a second. So you're sort of saying, how do you know that the reality that you see around you,
right?
Do you mean with sort of 100% certainty?
Well, of course we have acceptable levels of certainty, and I absolutely accept that I have some level, and that's very personal, at which I say something is true. But what I object to is the theist who will normally they'll claim 100% assurity, not confidence, assurity that it is true. And I go, come on, man, be reasonable. You don't have that.
Yeah, so you're sort of getting into hard solipsism, which I find to be a fascinating subject, and it's sort of they think there's a way around it by sort of saying, well, God's revealed it, and therefore God is this special exception. But the problem is that you're relying on the same inductive sort of logic that to say, hey, God showed me, therefore it is true. That's the same inductive logic that everybody else is using. If your experience of God, or whatever you have in your mind of God, is in fact incorrect, it's been injected in there by some extra dimensional alien, for instance. This is just an example, right? Then that you cannot rely on that, because if your experience of God is completely false, there's no way you can rely on it.
Right, and I've made exactly that argument with theists, saying, look, the only way that you would know you had interacted with something other than self, right, is through what is always true in all interactions with other than self, that Mark Reed has experiences I don't have. Mark Reed looks at things ways that I don't look at it. Mark Reed thereby has information and emotional states that I don't maintain. Through communication, Mark Reed can tell me of those experiences, and I can go, holy crap, I'm not Mark Reed.
Well, it gets even worse, because you can't even be assured that you're talking to Mark Reed right now.
Right.
You can only know that your brain is registering a certain memory of, because you don't see in real time. It's just sort of what you're doing is seeing memories, very rapid fire going through your head. So you can't even be assured, like sort of simulation theory is sort of what they call it. You can't be even assured that you're talking to me right now. You could be a brain in a vat kind of thing.
Sure.
So yeah, it's kind of worse than that. And I think it's even worse because if you're talking about simulation theory, you may be a simulated person who thinks they're having individual thoughts, but may be part of some gestalt partitioned mind.
Right.
So like the whole cognito ergo sum, like, I think therefore I am, is all well and good, unless there is no individual I that we're talking about.
Right.
And then
you're
it gets
assuming
into,
the I. Right.
Right. It gets into real muddy waters, because that may not even be right itself. All I can say for certainty, and I think I can say this with with absolute confidence, is that there are thoughts, therefore a reality exists, like an absolute reality exists. I don't make any claim on what it can be. I don't make any claim on what its structure is or my part in it. But I think that you can be absolutely certain that something is there, because if not, then where are the thoughts coming from, or where are the thoughts being received to?
Right.
Caterpillar, I love you too. They are fantastic.
Yeah, she's wonderful. I'm sorry, they prefer they them. They are wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
I've never had a chance to. I mean, I've read of 200 or less spaces caterpillar, but I've never spoken, so I have no idea. Although I like what they write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
Sorry, go, James.
the issue of the I, like how it's defined, has been like a central theme for me throughout most of my life. And it played a big role in my deconversion and loss of faith from Christianity. And I don't want to hijack the stream by going in a completely different direction, but I'll just say that when you mentioned that we can't even know that the I exists in the sense we think it exists, I'll go further and say I'm confident that it doesn't. And we can have a different stream about that sometimes if you guys want to, because it's like one of my favorite topics. But like I said, it would be a divergence from the current topic. So,
Well, if this conversation should naturally evolve into some other conversation, well, that's humanity. So there you go.
right, but
What's it supposed to be about?
Us talking about whatever we like.
Okay,
it started
then
off
definitely falls under that heading.
right, right. So it started off as a part 2 from JG's, or is it G? Is it G? I don't know how you pronounce it.
He would pronounce it JG.
JG's stream, where the question was, and if I remember correctly, why does your morality matter?
Something like, yeah.
Excellent. I love morality questions. Yes.
Yes, and I didn't realize we were on borrowed time on a small timer when I got in, and I was, I think, the third guest, and so I ate up the rest of the time and didn't mean to, and didn't get to finish saying half the stuff I wanted to say. And Jay kept having to bring me back on topic. He's like, "Let's go back to the topic. Let's come back to the topic," because I didn't mean to wander off.
Topic. No, you did not wander off. In my opinion, my assessment of it, but you were creating what you think is, or what I think also is, a necessary loop attached to the idea to bring it around, to give it to give it some kind of concretized subfloor.
Right. He didn't. Either he didn't realize that or didn't want me to. I'm not sure which, but
I think he was just pressed for time. He is a brilliant person as well.
Yeah, I'm new to his channel. I wasn't sure, but I also know he was tired. Like I could hear it in his voice when we were done. You could just tell. So I didn't take it personal at all.
Yeah. People have different reasons for going. Like, we all have lives. We're all doing stuff.
Sure, but that's just originally. So we kind of continued the discussion from there, and it's gone into a bunch of I think we did a pretty good job of staying on topic. But for me, the discussion of the I was a big deal for me. Now I say I, even though I don't believe that I exists in an objective way, because it's a practical frame of reference. How I put it is this: if we light a flame upon a candle, in that moment, that flame is the flame that we lit. However, a moment later, and it's hard to quantify a moment. What are we, 10 seconds or 1 second, a tenth of a second? I don't know. But a moment later, the heat and the light that is the fire isn't the same as it was when we first lit it. That fire has already left. In fact, the moment we see it, technically that's old information, because it takes time for the light to travel to our eyes. It takes even longer for the heat to travel. And so it's already outdated information. It's like looking at the sun. You think you're seeing real-time light coming from the sun, but you're not.
Yeah.
Right? And of course, the distance...
Minutes?
Yeah, something like 8 minutes. Now, obviously, the distance traveled between a candle and our eyes is a lot shorter. So functionally, we can call it real-time. But it's still the same point. Like... So, 1 second later, 10 seconds later, 1 minute later, we're going to say the fire that exists upon the wick is the fire that we lit. But it's actually not. It's been seamlessly replaced by new fire, new light, new heat, a new part of the wick, burning all new oxygen and all new wax, melting all new wax. And so it's not really the same flame, but as a practical frame of reference, we see it's the same fire, the same flame. And to me, that's what it means when I say that I exist, and that I'm a continuation of the James that existed yesterday and that existed 5 years ago, because I am the continuation of the flame that had been lit when I was born, or arguably before
I
I was
would
born.
push back on that. I would push back on that.
Short
I
pause
think
before
that,
you do. Just a
yeah,
brief
sure,
pause
sure.
before you do. Nerdy rodent. Now I know what kind of rodent you are. You are a groundhog. And I'm going to go smoke a cigarette and get a cup of coffee, refresh a coffee, guys. Please feel free to continue or leave or whatever you do. But thank you so much for your time so far. Peace and respect also to Iron Charioteer.
Oh, Iron
I'm
Charioteer's
Sherry's
here.
here. Hey, good to see you, buddy.
And
Yeah, so what you described is almost a ship of Theseus, right? It's sort of,
yeah.
if you replace all the planks and all the mast and sails and everything on the ship, when does it stop becoming that ship? But I think I consider the identity to be a bit different than your physical body. So we kind of do say, hey, yeah, it's your physical body, and we know that our cells are being replaced all the time, and I think that's sort of what you're getting at. But I think that, if you have, like, and I'll make an analogy here. If you have a computer and you replace every single part, but you transfer the contents of the memory and hard drive over, it will still be the same computer kind of thing, just with different parts in it. You know what I mean? The information
I do.
continues.
I
So
do.
I kind of more look at identity as the summation of the information that you're sort of carrying, as well as the sort of emergent consciousness that that neurological pattern has. And the pattern doesn't really change. And of course, that's influenced by your physical body. So you say, hey, that's my body. That is part of me. That's something that makes up me. But I think that it's more that your identity is retained in the mind of the body rather than it is the body itself. I remember a neurologist describing it once. We sort of wear these meat suits around, and I sort of liked that analogy because it's not really us. Like, it's the mind that is us, an identity, rather than the physical body.
That makes sense. And I will continue with that idea. I
Yeah.
grant, this is how I see it at least, that I don't think there's necessarily a right and a wrong answer to identity. If somebody seats the premise of their identity on their musical abilities, for example, or the state of mind that they experience when they play certain music, being unique to them because it's a combination of different factors that are unique to them. If that's what they identify as the seat of their identity, and then they suppose for a moment that there's an afterlife where that will be recreated, then I can grant that in that context they can say that they're going to exist again, at least within the context of their narrative, what they
Right.
expect to happen, what they imagine to happen, or whatever. Even if it
Yeah.
does happen, that's them. If that's where they seat their identity, I don't think there's a right or a wrong issue. And what you're saying makes sense to me because, again, not a right or a wrong issue. But I don't 100% agree with the idea that our sense of identity or that our memories don't change, because I think our memories change in a very gradual way, and I think we're just not here long enough. I think that maybe we live to be 70 or 80. I don't think we're here long enough to experience a complete change in our memory set. I think that if we live to be 1,000, that it gradually, like, there would be pretty much nothing left of the original memory set from when we were 10 years old or 20 or whatever else. I just think that it gradually replaces with other stuff, not just because the memories are malleable, but just because our relationship to our memories changes constantly. And I just, this is the thing that I had when the issue that I had with religion early on. When I would watch the original Star Trek series, and people would get on the teleporter pad and they'd get materialized somewhere else. And I bet you already know where I'm going with this.
Right.
My thought was, okay, are they really being teleported or are they being killed and then replaced with a clone at the distant location? And the conclusion I came up with is, yeah, they're being killed and replaced in an alternate location. But later on, in different versions of the series, they went ahead and tried to solve that problem by proposing and showing that the people being teleported maintain consciousness, which was theoretically impossible even if it could teleport people. But this is how they solved the issue, to put people's minds at ease. Because this is what occurred to me. If you make a clone of me that has all my same memories, and it identifies as me because it has all my same memories, But I'm still alive when you do it. I'm going to say, okay, they identify as me, and now maybe they want to compete for who gets to be the real me. But I'm still here, so that's not me, right? And so, but at the same time, if somebody was able, in the process of making the clone, was able to make it to where my consciousness existed in both bodies at the same time, in both brains at the same time, where I saw out of 4 eyes instead of 2 in the moment, to where I had a sense of ownership over both locations in both bodies, and then you let the first body die, and now I'm only in the second body. That passing of the torch, that sense of I never lost consciousness. I had a sense of ownership and presence in both places at once, and now I'm in the second body. That passing of the torch sort of experience would probably make me feel like the original person didn't die, they just now exist over here. But and this is the thing, because my mom was a Jehovah's Witness for a long time, this is a major issue that I had with them, because they believe that when you die, that God just remembers how you were assembled. He remembers, like in a hard drive, right? It's all stored in there. And so what he does is he remakes you, except perfect. So you no longer have any flaws, no physical flaws, no psychological flaws, etc. And so that's just you all over again. And because that person has all your memories, they certainly identify as you. They recognize their face and their voice and whatever else. They have the same memories, same identity. But my thought was, but what if God did that before the original me was gone? And now he's like, hey, look, just to reassure you that I'm going to keep my promise, I've already resurrected you. Here's the new you. And I'd be like, but I'm still here. And then God would say, I know, isn't it great? You get to actually meet the other you, the continuation of you that's going to be in the new system, this paradise. And my response would be, clearly that's not me, because I'm still standing right here. I haven't died yet, dude. And so it's the same kind of thing where I didn't think that deeply about it when I was younger, but the older I got, the more I thought about it. I'm like, the only difference between those two scenarios, where God remembers me and remakes me in a new paradise, versus clones me, downloads a copy of my memories, and lets me meet my replacement clone, is the series of events. It's still the same actions. It's still the same thing happening. It's just that in this particular scenario, I get to meet the other me before the first one of me dies, and only in that moment do I recognize, holy crap, resurrection is just another name for replacement. So I'm earning a place in this paradise, and somebody else gets to enjoy it after I die, just because they identify as me? That's not the same. And this is what began, is a continuation of the Star Trek teleporter question, right? This is the natural evolution of that way of thinking, where I began to realize that I'm not satisfied with this. And so what I did is I went around asking all the JWs I could find, and what is the I? And it can't be genetics if identical twins have the same genetics. And now, technically, there's some variation between identical twins, but I didn't know that at the time. And so the question was valid within the context. It's like, well, if somebody else has identical genetics, are they you? And the answer is no, you're two different people. And plus, if you maybe go to a heaven, for example, in a different religion, you don't even have genetics, probably. There's no DNA. So that can't be the basis of saying that that's still me. And our memories are mostly, or at least partly false, right? Because we have these very fallible memories. We have false memories, all of us do. And so if a God wanted to make a perfect being in a paradise, he would have to make sure that there was no lies in paradise, no falsities at all. So he would have to make sure... Right, no sadness either. So he'd have to make sure that the copy-pasted memories in this replacement body, which I consider to be a replacement person, he would have to make sure that they didn't include any of the false memories, any of the misconceptions about the entire journey. And so with that would be such a fundamental change between the original person and the next person that I don't even think they would identify as the same person, because their
Well,
whole entire go ahead.
yeah, the problem there, and I see what you're saying, that if you met a clone of yourself, then that would not be you. And I see what you're sort of saying, but I wasn't trying to infer, because you sort of said, yeah, our memories change over time. Absolutely, they do. They always do. Like, you are never the same person, if you will, moment to moment, but you've got the same identity. You sort of identify as this person. You can't make a clone and transfer a consciousness without changing even slightly what those memories are, because that as soon as that clone starts to run, they will have different experiences than what you are having in a different body. Even from a purely spatial point, they will be in a different location in the universe. They will be taking in different amounts of data. You have then split the identity, and it doesn't matter how hard you try, and you would have to have the same people occupying the same place in order to get the same input and therefore retain the same identity, and that's impossible. You can't do that. So with the teleporter thing, it's sort of, well, yeah, you're splitting one person off, but that one person has a completely different spatial reference than the other one. He's going to have different experiences than the other one. You're basically, rather than, I mean, I get what you're saying, though. I do understand what you're saying, but if you did have a perfect replica with the same identity, it wouldn't be you, or you wouldn't say that it's you. But I'm not sure how identity and self are different in that case.
So
I think we're talking about different things.
perhaps overlapping but different. But here's the thing: if their different experiences makes them a different person, then doesn't my different experiences from who had from the experiences I had yesterday make me a different person than the guy that identifies as me from yesterday? I mean, I have a different
Quite possible.
experiences.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we're sort of a different person from day to day because our memories
Right.
change. But we're still
Right.
the same identity. I still label myself as certain things, and the patterns that my thoughts are in are generally the same, because there is that contingent sort of, or that continuous thought of one
Sure.
into the other. So my identity doesn't change. The person that I am does. I mean, I'm a much different person than I was when I was 18 or something. Much different. So that has to change. It has to. But does that mean our identity changes? I don't think so.
So I think that our premise of identity remains constant, because we have the same name, and we identify as an individual that has the larger story, and then we just say that the story continues to evolve, but it's still the whole story is encapsulated as the adventures of this single person that I am. And so in that context, we can say that the premise of our identity remains the same, because it's the same encapsulated story. It's just got more to it tomorrow and then the next day and the next day. So this is why I say that there's no necessarily right or wrong about identity. We can seat our identity anywhere we want to, and that's just how we choose to seat our identity. But at the same time, I found it really unsatisfying that not just the Jehovah's Witnesses, but even mainstream churches, because, okay, they're not talking
Right.
about resurrection to a physical earth, but they're still talking about remaking you as this other kind of identity, or this other kind of being, rather. This other kind of, in fact, it's even further removed, because now you don't even have DNA. You're probably not going to, I mean, you're going to be even more different than the original. And we can say that more different is a necessity because it needs to be more perfect, but how much of you can, I mean, if you, at least with the ship of Theseus, in theory, you're replacing it with identical panels, and
Correct.
with
Yeah.
identical functionality, identical relationship to the ocean in which it sails, and and now we're talking about a whole new realm, not just a new ocean. And the panels are different, like the pieces are different. They're made out of different stuff, and they're shaped a different way, and they have a different function and a different relationship to the ocean in which they sail. And like, so much is fundamentally different that it's even less the same than the ship of Theseus would be. I think it's even harder to argue that it's the same ship you started with, the same person you started with, if that makes any sense.
So, but we had the technology to say, dismantle a human to the atom kind of thing, to the subatomic level, and take those atoms somewhere else and put them together exactly the same, and then transfer the memories, that would be the same person, right?
Um, I think the idea with that is, I mean, doesn't that appeal to sentimentality though, where you have a sense of identity connection to the specific atoms that you're built with right now?
Well,
I mean,
that's my point. That's kind of, I think that, well, for instance, if you made a um, if somebody duplicated your body down to the atoms and then reassembled it elsewhere, but they didn't transfer the contents of your memory, you certainly wouldn't be the same person.
right, right.
So I
So
guess what I'm getting at is that regardless of your physical form, in some way that identity has to be contingent on the memories and the mind that you have.
I suppose I mean, that's fair. Like, yes, you could seat your identity in that way, and it's valid. I would grant that it's valid. So my problem with the religious proposition isn't that it's not valid. It's that
Right.
it's that I'm not clear on where I would be seating my identity. And if you give me an answer about where I'm seating my identity, one, where is that specified in any Bible? And two, why am I supposed to feel like that's where my identity should be seated? Right. So you know, if there's a James in a heaven theoretically, and it doesn't really matter where the kingdom is or what it's made out of at this point, and some of my memories have been copied over, not all of them, because so many of them were false, and you can't have any falsities in a paradise. So only
Right.
some of my
Or
memories.
yeah. Or the, how could your brother be in hell and you still happy in heaven? So obviously they would have to change that somehow. They would have to. You know what I mean? Like if you had
Right.
an atheist brother that was suffering in hell, you'd feel sad about it, but there can't be any sadness in heaven, so they'd have to change that part of your mind not to feel sadness.
Well,
Right. So they
let's
have to
not
make.
make too many Christian assumptions in this.
Well, I
Right. Well,
don't
this is just.
know. I don't know about the Christian identity because I've never been a Christian, so I don't
Okay.
know what you would take on as your identity in that case.
Yeah, I'm not saying which version of Christianity is best or which one's truest or falsest or like which one's whatever. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that in the hypothetical that I was presented with, I wasn't able to make sense of the I, the self, in terms of the promise. Because the promise is you can live forever in a paradise. God will resurrect you into the paradise. And there's different versions of that promise. There's the JW version. There's the mainstream Protestant version, right?
Sure.
There's the reincarnation version, and there's the whatever. So
Yeah.
it's like of all the different versions that I knew of, I found them all unsatisfying because I'm like, if we can't identify what the I is in some objective sense, or at least in some sense that makes me feel like yes, I'm going to seat my identity there, my sense of identity there, then especially if we can't answer it at all, like you can't even tell me what the I is, then
So
it's a hollow promise. It doesn't mean anything.
yeah. Well, do you think that some Christians will seek their identity in the eternality of God? They will basically go, well, my only identity is that which God gives me, and since God is eternal, that's an eternal identity.
Okay.
They can
I
say
don't
that.
know. I've never, like I said, I've never been a Christian, but that is something that occurs to me.
Sure. What are your thoughts on that, Richard?
Well, I'd actually like you to review it because some part of that was like referring to the story, and some part of that was referring to Christianity, and I want to eliminate the Christian part of it so that I can talk only to what the text of the Bible claims. So I think there's a lot of Christian presupposition in it as a whole in its assessment, and I think that part needs eliminated, and I think that's this following part. Um, like if you went to college say microbiology, what have you, whatever specialty,
Sure.
and you're say 23 years old, right? And you're in this rather advanced course, and there walked into class day one a 14-year-old. Everyone would notice that there's a 14-year-old attending the class, and because that's really weird. And the reason that I bring that up is because it's our natural tendency to pay attention to that which is unusual. That is, the predator hiding in the grass, if you will, needs special attention because it's not grass. And so it makes sense that we would give too much attention because of those things in our past to the anomaly. So we tend to concentrate on the anomaly. Choose a blank spot on your wall and look at it closely enough, and you'll find anomalies in it. And if you go to describe to me that part of the wall, you're going to not tell me about the wall, you're going to tell me of the anomalies there. And that's how you're going to describe it, is by what's anomalous. So the Christian over-concentrates on the anomaly, which is not their experience, especially where the culmination of the story is our ascension into heaven. So they tend to go, oh, all these dead people are going to be resurrected into heaven, and then they'll assume they have to die to go to heaven because of other problems. So they tend to look at it from that point of view. But what the story actually claims is the people living at the time ascend body and all, and gives a few examples of bodily ascension. So the you always remained the you through that new experience and into the new experience. Through the transitional experience and into the new experience. So literally the you is the you. Nothing changed. As far as recomposition of the pre-existing people, Christians will, and I want to use words in an unusual way to open the mind. The text of the Bible claims that there are quote-unquote familiar, as in having familial or family ties to you. That is, they study you and they know you at a very, very deep level through what could only be described as remote understanding and transfer of information, i.e. prayer. That is, in order for there to be a familiar demon, they pray to you. Okay, and that's how they become familiar. But we have this different label for non-obvious reasons to me. The idea of the angelic being a guardian or guardian angel. But in order to be a guardian angel, they are a familiar. That is, they pray to you. And I know Christians find it quite uncomfortable to look at it that way, but it's literally what's being described. Okay. So what would it mean to be familiar? Well, it means exactly what the word entails, that you've studied a thing, okay? And we could hypothesize. Hypothesize isn't even the right word. We could guess how it is that that's functionally transferred back into the person, but it's evident to me that in heaven there are angels who become familiar with each one of us and store parts of us in themselves. So you could do like I think like maybe a Star Trek Vulcan mind meld kind of an idea, and how that's put back into the person when their flesh is restored. I'm not certain of that exact act, how exactly they perform that, but it seems that at least in an internal critique that's the claim. So what's being spoken of is restoration of human beings through existent human beings' genetics, putting the right combination, that combination being known of that person, say the genetics of James Apperson, into a viable ovum. Yes, it requires viable ovums and like a uterus and all that stuff, and that they quote unquote and literally be born again.
There's a lot wrong with that. For a start, you said it's evident to you. I'm not sure how the workings of heaven would be evident, and like you to address that. But the whole point is that even if you do a genetic kind of replication of somebody,
Sure.
their mind is different, and that's the whole point of the I. Even if you transfer their consciousness, I think James's point is that that would be a different agent, it would be a different being than what it was originally, even if the mind is exactly the same.
No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I have to agree with you. They are only effectively the same being. They are not literally the same being.
Well, I think it's the same identity. Like you could have the same identity kind of thing. Like so, if the exact same mind, exact same body, it would have all the same labels and all the same memory experiences. But as I was pointing out, it wouldn't be exactly the same because as soon as you separate those conscious minds, they have different experiences of the world, even slightly different.
Separate. Okay, I'm going to object to separate those conscious minds. What I'm saying is a replication of that conscious mind is what they're claiming.
Yeah. So when you replicate it, you have two conscious minds that are functionally identical to start with, but will have separate sort of paths they will, or separate experiences they will have.
From that point forward, yes.
From that point forward, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so so in the idea of numerical identity, it is not the same being. I totally agree.
Yeah, so I guess that's sort of what James is saying. That's his problem with sort of a...
I don't know why that's a problem. You weren't the same person you were when I started this sentence.
It depends. I think that my sense of identity remains the same, and
Yes.
I keep the same sense of identity as to when I was a child kind of thing. I'm a different person than when I was a child, and I was sort of going over this. But my identity includes that being as a child. So when you look at psychology, you have a number of sort of people within you, like the critical parent and the vulnerable child and the petulant child. There's a lot of them, and they all are part of you. It's called Gestalt consciousness theory. But those are, and that child that I used to be that was a different person, I still have that as part of my identity. It still is the identity that I have.
Right.
So
effectually, if all of that is a part of you and all of that is in you, then you are you. Now, if something were missing, that would be a problem. You wouldn't be you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the claim is that you will be you. But just starting with, you'll just have new experiences after that.
Well, the whole point is that if and James made a really good point that if you sort of just say you do this replication of the exact same DNA and transfer the consciousness, but you don't kill the old one, you just duplicate it. If you met that other clone, you would say, well, that's not me.
Right.
Right.
In identity, it's not you.
But they would beg to differ. Their identity, they would say they are me.
Well, they have to admit the experience that they just met themselves, which is a new experience, and each of them, in the idea of indexicals, would say, "I am me," and the other one could say that same statement as a quote that you are you. You could quote it, "I am me," but from the other perspective, it doesn't mean the same thing. So now they have a separation of experience that's individualistic and are no longer able to say that they are the exact same being. So I think it works logically to say something like, if you lived into end times and ascended into heaven, then you were always you, right? And that the dead know nothing, those who died in the past who don't experience it that way. There is no comparative to make, and effectively they are them even though they perished.
You mean after they get resurrected, they're them? Is that what you mean?
Yes, they are them. Effectually.
I mean, effectually. So they would have a sense of identity that says, I'm the same person brought back. They would feel
and there'd
that
be nothing
way. They
to
would think
compare
that
it
way.
to. Right. Except
but,
for the like things like you wouldn't have the same scarring, the same body weight. There could be variables like that.
So I don't think it's a right or a wrong thing. Now let's say for example that the cloning and download and copy pasting of the memories happened, but I'm the person that was cloned. I'm the new body with the copy pasted memories. Let's say that this happens, and I know that it happened. Like I recognize that I'm the new one. Because of the way that my mind works about this issue. I would not identify as James Apperson anymore. I would say that even though I have a sense of identity based on the memories that have been copy pasted perfectly in the body that I'm in, and I would probably complain about that because I wouldn't mind having an upgrade, but I would just say I'm like, look, I know that because I know that I'm the clone, I reject the identity that my brain is trying to feed me. I know that it's a lie. But if I hadn't worked through things the way that I had, and then I knew I was the clone with the copy pasted memories, I might then compete for the title and say that we're both equally James Apperson. You're not more so, and then I might
Very good.
And
Very good.
I don't think either thing is necessarily wrong. Well, I appreciate that, Richard. I think that both of them are fair.
No, we're running down. First of all, I want to recognize a quote by a dead guy. It's a sign. It's a sign of intellectual honesty and intellectual prowess to be able to entertain an idea that you don't hold as true. And congratulations to you both. By the way, because I think that's true. You don't have to adopt the idea to run down the logic of it and see where that would go and accept evidence and logic to correct along the way. I mean, when we drive a car, we're constantly correcting. It's fine. Okay, so let's drive down that road. All right. So I agree with you that you are not the identical being in the sense of numerical identity, okay? And also in knowledge that you can't be lied to about it because that would make those in heaven dishonest. They must tell you the truth. In fact, you grew up, you were gestated, born, and grew up being adjusted to this new paradigm, okay? If you should have perished on the earth. So that this has always been a part of it in your present experience, okay? Including the understanding of what you were before, and and in fact that is not the actual you now, which is exactly why the text presents ideas like being born again, and why it says what it says about being born again, in the literal sense, not in the mental state sense. So that there would be no, it's not and I know Christians profess this, but the text does not, that it's an all of a sudden pop into reality as a full-grown adult in heaven. That's never described. That's in fact, it creates paradoxes and other problems that can't be true, and the text itself doesn't claim any such thing. In fact, it claims the opposite. You're born, it's a very gradual process. You'll be able to adapt to it over time. You'll be just fine. Okay, so what everything that you said there, James, is precisely why a guardian angel would have some kind of actual experience in order to claim that they have understanding. Do you see that?
Any sentient being would need some kind of experience to draw from.
Right. Sure. Okay, so the claim of the angelic that they can be good guides is not a hollow claim, because within the story, though Christians will deny it, it declares precisely where these angelic came from. That they were people on an earth who, going through end times, I hate the phrase, but I'll use it so just for ease of communication, that they went through end times and accepted Christ. And by Christ, I mean the truth, the way, and the light, not the person.
So, but I guess my problem is with that, is that if the agents in heaven, whoever they may be, are telling you that, hey, you're a clone
Yeah.
of this person, and you've just had whatever memories you can have in heaven, because obviously, I mean, I don't know if you believe there can be any sadness in heaven or any depression or anything like that, or
We'll get
you
into
know,
that.
any of the things like that. But then I would know that I am a clone and not the original person. That in fact,
Right.
the memories that identity has would then be known to be false. That body would not have experienced, say, holding my wife, for instance.
Right.
That's not true. So
Right. So you have to decide. You have to decide, what are you?
Well, I'm not me.
Well, okay. What are you now?
What am I now? I'm
Yeah.
not sure. Could you elaborate?
Okay. Are you your fingernails, or are you a compilation of everything that is your physicality? Are you your experiences and your memories? Is that the
Oh, I see,
intrinsic
yeah.
you, or are you something more complex than that?
Yeah, so I think that I am the emergent pattern of both my body and my mind. I think
Okay.
that, like, who I am when I talk about the self is
Mhm.
a complex pattern of my mind's identity, that which I think is me, and my
Yeah.
body's form, that which I am.
Fine. Okay, fine. So tomorrow you'll have a new experience, and you'll adopt the new experience because you have to take it as your reality, and you'll integrate those new experiences, whatever they numerically are quantified as, and you'll adapt all of that and adopt those parts and reject some things, and you'll become something different than you are now. So the really important thing in what Mark Reed is not the physical animal, but this emergent property. Now, all you do is say, okay, and new experience.
Yeah, but the whole point is that if that was done, if you copied my body and my mind
Mm-hmm.
before I was gone, right? Before
Mm-hmm.
I was gone, I would not say I am that person standing opposite me, even though they
Right.
have my memories and a exact copy of my body. And they
Yes.
would not say they are me, even though the same is true.
Correct.
So how would the copy then be me?
It's not. It's
Okay.
experientially you. It's not numerically you.
Yeah, so that sort of says, well, that's not really a resurrection as so much a duplication of the
Yes.
identity that I
Yeah, which
have.
is why the text says that it will be different. That it is not the precise you. It's the best possible version of you. And that it uses words like vivify. It gets translated into like vivified or quickened or perfected. But the idea is that it's not you literally. It's you effectively.
Okay.
And that's fine if that's the way you read it, and I'll just grant that it's correct. I'll just grant that. I still find it
Sure.
unsatisfying. If I honestly believed, I mean, this is just one more explanation that I find plausible. It's coherent enough. But if I were to look at it as a religious proposition where somebody's
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, I believe this thing. Isn't it great news? Don't you want to be part of that?" I would say, "Meh." Meh.
Well,
Well,
that
you won't be
depends.
part of it. That's the point. You won't be part of it.
That's exactly why I would care. I wouldn't
Yeah.
feel that my seat of identity doesn't find any resonance with that at all. I'm like, great,
And
you'll clone
perhaps,
me, and my clone will be pretty happy in a paradise. But you know what? You could just make anybody and replace me with anybody. Why do they have to have my face and some of my memories? Well, why should I care?
Right, right.
I think it's a reasonable argument, and perhaps this is why there is an advantage to being alive for the ascension, that never happened to you.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm okay with that. Like, it doesn't bother me. It just doesn't have resonance for me. And it's the same thing. Like, even when I think about what I know about the baby that then grew and grew and grew, new memories, new relationship paradigms, etc. I don't really identify personhood with the baby that was born to this name, this lineage. I call it a lineage of identity.
Yeah.
I don't have a sense of that was me about the baby boy Apperson that was born. I just know that I trace back to them, like as
Yeah.
a series of events, and so they're part of my story in that way. But
Right.
they didn't have any of these memories. They didn't have any of these relationships. They didn't have any of this personality. They didn't even have my wonderful hair that people should talk about more often. By the way, we need to have a stream about that.
It
But
is lovely.
thank you. They didn't have any of that. So, like, it's not. I don't identify with them at all. Like, that's not me. And so
Right.
within that perceptual paradigm, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just talking about my perceptual paradigm or where I see my identity. Now, in 100 years, we'll just say 10, because whatever. I'm not going to think of that person as me. I think of them as my descendants. I think of every day prior to this. Those are my ancestors. Those are people that I inherited a lineage from, and
Right.
so each new day, each night, how I see it is I die, and the dream state is the passing of the torch, where that day's experiences are processed and incorporated into the
Right.
developing mind, and then when they wake up, that's a new person that has inherited
But
a
but
sense of identity.
isn't that completely defeating of the objection? Okay, let's try to look, and I know this is not even reasonable to ask of us right now, but this is what I attempt to do within myself. I'd invite you to attempt the same. Try to look at it as if right now, try to look at it from the perspective of the new clone of you and how it would look back on that experience, and eventually it would just come to, well, that happened. It was just a thing it's no more relevant to my present experience than the fact that I was once an infant who didn't know what mom was.
Well,
Right.
I have a completely different outlook as James, because it's very important to me to know that I am that young person. And don't get me wrong, I don't remember being an infant and things while your mind is developing, but there comes a certain point where I am aware that I was a young person, and
Sure.
that is something that I do carry with me, that in a way I still am that person. That is
Mm-hmm.
still me. It's still part of me and will be forever.
Sure.
I think that people sort of deny that part of themselves, and they're denying their inner child, the one that sort of finds joy in simple things. That facet of yourself is so important to acknowledge. Well, it
I
is for
agree.
me anyway. It is for me.
I agree, and I have a solution to that. But go ahead, and then I'll tell you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Go ahead.
All right. So my solution to that is I experientially know what it's like to be a child because I inherited the memories. They were passed to me as a torch. They've been passed to each lineage, each new incarnation, and so I possess the experiential knowledge of childhood, and because of that, there is a facet of me that exists in the now. There's neurological wiring and relationship paradigms and perceptions and understandings and emotions that are connected to all of it. I know what it's like to be a child because I inherited that information from my priors. And so I do celebrate that part of me, and it is part of me that I value and that is very relevant to my sense of identity and my place in the world. I just think I came about. I have that. The reason I own it now and possess it now and experience it now and identify with it now is because it's here. I value it, and I got it no matter where I got it from. I have it now. And so I feel like it's like ancestors handing down their memories to their descendants, and so now you've got a larger view of the world because you have inherited memories beyond the scope of what your own experience has been, but you still value those memories, and in a way you still miss the people that were lost along the way to your ancestors because you remember who they are. and so they matter even though you never personally met them in a way you have, and in a way you haven't, right? It's like a thing is like true and not exactly true at the same time. It's a paradox. And it's just, here's the thing. I have more than one way of looking at it. I have the traditional view of identity that is kind of default in our society, where I think like a normal person does about identity, because that's the way that I grew up, and that neurological wiring is still part of my physical brain. But I also have these other ways of looking at identity that are divergent from that, and they exist at the same time. So when I'm having these conversations with you guys about this, I'm also having conversations with myself about this, because I am literally of two minds about it, if not more. In fact, I know that it's more, because from another perceptual paradigm, there's only one person. We stand right now in a billion different places with a billion different faces, or closer to 8 billion last count there was, and there have been countless more of that one person since humanity has existed. And so in this way, which is an equally valid paradigm as far as I'm concerned, in that way, the resurrected person is me, but so are you, and so are my enemies, and so are anybody that I happen to have as a lover. It's just, if that makes any sense, it's kind of a Buddhist way of thinking. So I'm not picking one particular identity paradigm or narrative and saying this is the best one or this is the truest one. I'm simply saying that I find the traditional religious ideas about identity and continuation to be not reasonable and not resonant for me personally. But I understand how they can be satisfying for somebody else. They're just not satisfying and connecting for me. I think they're insufficient. I think they're poorly contrived.
Well, let me be clear that I think that from my perspective right now, I don't like the idea of the replicated me, but I think if I were at even in this moment already the replicated me, I would look back at my past me and just say that's a thing I went through.
So I think I really disagree with you, James. I think that
I was hoping you would.
Yeah, from my point of view, I think that sort of with your ancestors and other people, you have no experiential memory of what they've been through. But I still have the experiential memory of what I went through when I was younger. That forms sort of the joyful child and the petulant child and all of these different gestalt identities that sort of psychology says make up our identity. So
Right.
I don't just mean, well, I carry on the memory of them. I mean that identity that is the child is still part of me. It is still something that makes up me. It's not just the memories of it. I really think that the best thing I have done for my own understanding of self, my own self-actualization, is to acknowledge that these identities are actually there. These different separate things that reside in me are there, and you can sort of you can talk to them almost like you can talk to another person. But it is internalized. It's sort of internalization of that. I mean, that might not be important to you. I get that people are different, but it's very satisfying to me because it explains so much of my own behavior and feelings and why certain things happen in my life and why I have multiple different perspectives on things, especially dependent on sort of my emotional state at the time. I've gained a lot of clarity through that. So that's why it's important to me. Sorry, go ahead.
So that makes sense. I understood all of it. It's coherent, it's rational, and I don't disagree. I think that is an equally valid framework of identity. It is not inferior to mine in any way, shape, or form. It is practical, it is reasonable, it is coherent. I can see how it would be absolutely a valid seed of identity for you. It's just... And it's the paradigm I grew up in, right? So, like I said, I'm of two minds or of more than two minds about this issue. So that's one of the paradigms that are in my brain and that I sometimes kind of automatically default back into. It's just that I have another part of my brain, which is a more recent neurological foundation that has pushed back on that idea. And because I couldn't get rid of that old idea, it's still there. And I like that it's still there. I like that I've got many different ideas in my head about different
Sure.
ways to frame the narrative of identity and relationship with the self, and I enjoy that. I celebrate that. I love hearing yours. It's relatable because it's one of mine. I just have multiples. Now, when I refer to ancestors, ancestor selves, I recognize it's a different definition than ancestors in the normal context. And so, in the context of ancestors as normally defined, no, I don't claim to have inherited their memories. Or if I have, I certainly am not consciously aware of it.
Oh, sorry.
But
I must have misunderstood what you were saying.
I just meant ancestor selves. I think of every day's prior self as an ancestor. I relate to them in that context where one dies.
You say past self.
My past self. So I like saying ancestor selves because
Yeah,
I
I
have
know, but that leads to confusion, as you can see.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Mine.
Unless I explain it, that's my bad. Midnight's right about that. It can lead to confusion because people don't normally use the word that way, right? But I'm taking a page from Richard's book and trying to use language in a different way to kind of get people thinking differently. But I need to clarify it. You're right.
Spoken.
Right. So appreciate. Yeah, Richard was talking about that earlier about using language in a different way to kind of open minds to like new ways of thinking and stuff. So. And that's
think
just
that's valid, yeah. But the problem is that there's normative sort of uses of language that if you don't actually sort of stop to explain the way that you're using it, you just cause confusion.
Right. I accidentally pull a Jordan Peterson when I do that and don't explain myself.
Okay, I have to
Right.
defend James here because I did take that context from within what he did say.
Well, I appreciate that.
Well, yeah, that's cool. But you must admit, if I'm going to use something like I'm going to use a term that isn't what the normal is, like if
right.
I start referring to my memories as floppy disks or something, you're probably going to get the wrong idea.
Right. So some people might get the inference, but some people will miss it. I need to be very careful when I use words in a different way, and but that's just what I mean.
Yeah. I've got no problem with you doing that. It's just and I'm not criticizing you. I may very well may have just missed the context. And my apologies. So I am on the autism spectrum. I do miss some things sometimes. So don't think it's you. I'm certainly not blaming you in any way, James.
No, I didn't take it personal. We're good.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's just when I think it's great that you use different language to kind of expand minds and stuff. I think it's fantastic. It's just we have to be wary that it doesn't cause confusion.
Right.
That's all.
Right. So
I think, James, the reason that you're using the term ancestors, and I would encourage you to always say ancestor self,
right.
just for clarity and ease for other people. That what you're saying is there's a certain level of detachment between the you now and the you then, and it's almost like seeing a movie or hearing a story of past James.
Kind of
Something like that. Like hearing about your grandpa.
It's something like that. When I don't share the native indigenous peoples, and I try not to say Indian because I've been told that that's not the right word to use anymore, but the native indigenous people's spirituality, I don't have their religious framework. But when they talk about honoring their ancestors as if their ancestors still live in some kind of spirit form, I can see some kind of practicality and beauty to that, even if it's not technically true. And I took from that this idea that wouldn't it be not necessarily the best or only, but wouldn't it be a beautiful way to relate to my experience, to my journey, to kind of relate to yesterday's me and the day before's me, going all the way back, as ancestors that I honor and whose memories I've inherited, so I have a special connection to. And that way, I'm honoring the experience, I'm not diminishing it at all, but I can maintain a sense of kind of objective detachment from it. But at the same time, a heartfelt sense of connection to it. So I'm not I'm still attached to it, but in an atypical way. So these things have value, and they're part of who I am, and they speak to my sense of identity, but I don't exactly feel like yesterday's me is just me with a little bit less experience. I feel like A part of me feels that way and part of me doesn't. Like I have these simultaneous ideas running at the same time. But I've harmonized them. Like there's no conflict because I realize that it's like standing in one particular, like take these three different ways of looking at identity and who I am and who I've been and put them in a three-dimensional box and now freeze frame them and I can walk around inside that box and look at it from different perspectives and see each of them and how they connect and they're independent ways of looking at my identity and who I am and who I've been, and they're not the same way of looking at it, but they're all valid, they're all reasonable, they're all coherent, and they're all there, and they're all part of me.
I like to.
And so,
Well, after you're done, I'd like to read something.
but
Yeah, sure,
Okay,
man.
let me-
Go for it.
Okay. Dear diary, I am in pain. No, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Yeah, that's the wrong
Quit
one.
that, man. Come on.
Dear diary of my past self, we've come a long way, haven't we, old friend? Though the issues which plagued us for decades are still with us, they are not as bad as they used to be. Progress was slow when we began our journey. Over a half a decade ago, we had to deal with our family tearing us down every step of the way, while struggling to find self-acceptance and self-validation was seeking it from others. We lost many friends during these last few years. Many of them came back, but our issues drove them away again. We have suffered so much guilt over losing that friendship and other friendships associated with it. Though the guilt is less now, it's still there. We still remember what we said and did back then. We could have done differently. There are times I loathe you so much for being a part of me. I never want to be you again. Part of you understands this anger and hatred. You want to improve, and you did. Though I am far from where we both want to be, we will get there if we work together. We are not bad people. We're hurt, damaged, shattered into a million pieces due to all the trauma we went through. Take my hand and let's heal together.
Okay, that is beautiful. And I want to say, now look at that from future you.
right.
If you are right now able to write that about past you, then wouldn't you have similar growth in future you looking back at present you?
Yeah, that's
Amen.
that's the point. There's this book I got called "Be Your Future Self," where it actually talks about seeing your future self as a different person, because your future self is inherently a different person, right? It's still you, but it's really weird to talk about identity because
Right.
you still have an identity that's you, but that identity changes. So it's like the fucking river, right? The river never changes, but the flow of the river, like, God, identity is fucking.
Midnight, not to tell you to shut up because I don't mean it that way, but just so that you might skip forward a little bit. They already did the whole. What's the name of that dichotomy? Someone's boat, someone's ship. What is it?
Ship of
The ship
Theseus.
of Theseus.
Ship of Thieves. They already did it. So everyone's already up to speed to that level.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just saying it's a mindfuck.
It is. It absolutely is.
I think all of this is like we've been on some really heavy topics like hard solipsism, sense of self, the
Yeah,
problem
sorry, I
of
wasn't in
mind.
here. I was tired as fuck.
Yeah, no, we've been going through the heavy brain hitters. You know, it's
Love
been
this stuff.
the largest brain
Yes,
hitters.
I definitely love this stuff too. I love studying about the brain, about psychology, how to improve the brain. You know, like cognitive behavior therapy, growth mindset.
So Midnight, let me do just a real quick catch up with you. If your physical self now that you know as you did perish, right? But we had collected DNA samples from you and had effectively downloaded all of your experiences and thoughts and feelings into some kind of mainframe, right? And then we took viable ovum and viable womb, and we recreated the physical you. Then say something about age 5 or maybe 10 years old. we put literal probes into your brain and transferred all of you back into you, plus you had the new experience. Would you identify you at that time as different from the you now, or the same as you now, and why?
Jesus Christ, heavy hitting question.
Welcome to my channel.
God damn. Well, I mean, I would say my clone would definitely be unique, like unique, yeah, unique to, yeah, unique to me, because of the experiences it had, because of the 5-year experiences it has. However, after you were to upload my experiences and memories to him, I fear, hold on. I fear he may, I fear he may. I fear he may not only have the mental illnesses he's developed at that age, he'll have mine as well.
Well,
So
wait.
congratulations.
But in that, you're kind of dismissing James Apperson's assessment, if you agree with him, the experience of the past ancestral self. Because in that time, that clone of you would look at all of this as slightly disconnected, a series of experiences and feelings they used to have.
Yeah, but I wasn't trying to dismiss what he said. I'm just making it. I'm just saying that, my clothes. Like, I still do it, obviously. You know what I mean? It would still be an experience to be like, okay, well, okay, well, I find myself in this body that that also shares, that also shares another, that God fucking damn it. My
Just slow down,
memories
brother.
yeah. Yeah, I find myself in my clone's body right now. Either one will override the other, or or we both share, the same body, right? To where be like, hey, who are you? I like, oh well, yeah, sorry, I'm you from, I'm past you. They just uploaded my memories to you. Now, if I was the clone, I'd freak out at first. It's like, whoa, what the fuck
I
did
would
they
think
do?
so.
Right? 'Cause it's
I think it'd be really freaky for some amount of time, but I think what indicates what would eventually rule in that idea of present self and past ancestral self is the reality of the now. That eventually that being would come to accept the reality of the now, and that would become the norm.
Yeah. Like, I really wish there was a way to do this in real life, so we could actually see this, or
That'd be a
even
little
run.
horrifying.
Well, yeah, but or even
Which
run.
brings up a
Hold on.
question in my mind.
Or even
In
run
Star
and
Trek,
Okay.
in Star Trek, when they had the transporter, why didn't they write into the script that there's also, on the beside the control board, a waste disposal collection device right there that takes all the impurities out of their body while they're doing that? Why, like, go ahead and get rid of diseases and add minerals where necessary and take excesses and buildups out of the body while you're. But anyway.
I mean, I still remember that. That the teleporter did filter out pathogens after they came back.
Did it?
Well,
When did they
I'll do
write
you
that?
one further. If you're taking apart somebody atom by atom, why can't you give them a bigger penis while they're transporting?
Well, you just have to request that before you get transported. No problem.
Right. Yeah. Well, it explains Kirk's charisma, I guess.
His mojo.
But at the risk of changing subjects, really quickly, I want to ask you, Richard, about hell.
Yeah.
So what is your version of hell? What is it that you envision when I say that?
Okay, so in similitude to my lack of clarity and understanding, because it's just not in the story, of how the personality and memories from angels are downloaded back into the person so that they are experientially the past them. They can have their ancestral selves. I'm not certain in the same way and for the same reasons how it is that the human consciousness stored by demons in familiars it can be culminated, put together, translated into a living, actual, functional demon. But it seems there's a claim there that the individual set of experiences still have an emergent property of sense of self, but they don't have self anymore. So now they're a self in some other animal that is not self, and they can't get out of it, and in fact cannot even kill themselves. They can't even stop the experience. And in the realization of self is also the realization of lack of others that you did know. So it's separation from family, it's separation from God, it's separation from physical touch, it's separation from love, it's separation from all of these things that we need. And I think that is what hell is.
Okay. But it's not annihilation, so you still would be conscious kind of thing.
Yes, although the dead know nothing, a consciousness restored to physicality would have new experiences and understand that it had past experiences. So I think the Christians conflate normally the idea of Sheol, and then they add into that the pit of fire outside of the old Hebrew towns. What's the name? What's that word? Do you know that word? Anyway, and then they add on top of that the lake of fire. Now Sheol, if we take it for what
Gehenna?
Gehenna, that's the word. Thank you.
Yeah.
If we take it for what it says itself and have necessary contextual changes and everything that it has to say, the dead know nothing. That is Sheol. When your body expires, you are no longer a consciousness. That is gone, which is what we see evidently true in science. And in our actual first-person experience, it's not hard to say something like, oh, they died. Even if you've never seen something die, you would recognize that it was different. Now something's missing. For lack of animation and lack of consciousness and all these sorts of things, you'd go, oh, that's definitely different. You wanted to say something, Mark, I thought, maybe?
Yeah, well, so I guess that's fine. So it sounds like sort of annihilation, but you seem to suggest you would still be self inside something that's not self. So
right, because the prayers of demons had stored up your experience, and somehow that if the experience is big enough, there's an emergent property of self from within those experiences.
So would this self have consciousness?
Apparently, yeah, that's the claim. I don't understand how or why. Of course, I don't understand how a mind has consciousness right now. But that's the claim that I see.
Mm-hmm.
So they also conflate the lake of fire and the second death. They confuse the second death as well. And I'd like to suggest, although you don't have to take my word for it, but I think enough definitional and contextual research will reveal that this is the only practical, applicable way to think of it. That if you removed the oceans, the mountains really would melt like wax. Here's why. Because the temperature stabilization of the crust is greatly due to just the sheer volume and the properties of water in the oceans, that it distributes temperature, and that's what keeps the crust solid. And with the seas removed, and there was no more seas, you would have catastrophic collapse of the crust, and everything would become liquid, i.e. a lake of fire. And that the second death being described there is death of physical self. Why? Because you can't stand in magma. trust me, you will not survive that. So they're conflating the three terms Gehenna, Sheol, and the lake of fire with hell when none of those are.
So what's the criteria for being resurrected bodily and going like sort of this prayer by demon thing?
I'm going to need a restructuring of that because my brain was not able to.
Yeah, no problem. So why will some people be resurrected and some people will be sort of in the sort of dreams of demons kind of thing, as you were sort of putting it? What's the criteria? Why will some people have a bodily resurrection and some not?
Well, because what I know of people, I think that almost all will have bodily resurrection.
Some won't.
What's that?
Some won't.
At some point?
Some won't.
And some won't. Yes, but
right.
I'm not going to say dismissible because losing one is too many, but a very, very, very small percentage. So much so that you probably never met someone who isn't well-adjusted enough to accept evidence in the now to change their mind on any given topic. They'll just change their minds. How do some fail, I think, is your question.
I guess. I mean, if that's the criteria for, not being resurrected.
If success is heaven, then not being resurrected,
sure, yeah.
or and I do not think that total destruction is described there of the person, only of their flesh. And we could get into whether or not that's the same person who's actually in hell. In the same way, is that the same person that's actually in heaven? And I would have to say no, it's not exactly the same person. But I think that there is certain people whose minds and the emergent property of self, that self, is of such perception and attitudes that they, even in the best of circumstances, cannot accept what they actually experience. Now, we identify that as crazy, colloquially. And so I'd have to say, well, not only crazy, but also a very, very, very specific kind of crazy could do that. So what you end up with is demons inheriting the absolutely crazy.
Well, I don't generally use that term for people.
I just don't know what else to say. It's so anomalous, like very, very anomalous, a hyper unusual case.
Well, I mean, you'd probably sort of say some kind of, acute disorder.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, there's more questions.
And a very rare disorder.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's more questions there. I don't necessarily think that people with an acute mental disorder should be accountable for their actions like that. I think that's really unfortunate. But if that's the case, that's the case.
That's not exactly what I'm saying, because okay, so there's an apparent overall emergent property of angel called God. And then it claims that God is the judge of a spirit of a person, which is not the same as soul. Soul meaning their literal flesh, including brain matter. That's soul, the thing that breathes, the thing that inspires and expires. That there's an interaction between those emergent properties. Let's say it's like in a mainframe or something like that, just so we can think about it more easily. And those two things interact, and that's quote unquote judgment of the dead. Okay, but they're not commingled or confused together in any way. and they interact with each other, and that's the moment of judgment. And say, okay, have we located one that should not be restored to this utopian society, because it not only could not live in this utopian society, it would actually cause problems in that society, which is unfortunate. But it's a culmination of that individual's emergent properties. It's not even the person themselves, because that person died. They're not there.
Okay. That's cool.
So it's not really hell of the person. The person naturally was annihilated. Whether they died of old age or a car accident, or they stayed on the earth until they were swallowed up by the lake of fire. They are gone. They're not there. So it's not exactly annihilationism, but it's not exactly giving the demonic nothing either. It gives them some assimilation of a person, which gives them depth of understanding of what persons is, and allows them, because what they're trying to do is reclaim their slaves. That's what they're trying to do. And there's a larger society of them that aren't even involved in trying to recollect slaves. And the slave, the ones trying to reclaim their slave class are a small part of that total society, and supported by that society. You could say it's like their priests, their Levitical priests. They have a mission to do that has to be supported, and they're not actually functionally creating any benefit to the larger society. They're actually a drain on that larger society, but it's still worth it to them to recollect slaves. And some of the details of that, I have to admit, I do not understand.
Okay, not a problem.
I think the eventual, the one possible logical conclusion is they mean to recapture all of Homo sapiens sapien everywhere throughout the universe, and would have great prosperity in their society, having regained how many billions upon billions, perhaps trillions of trillions of slaves again.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of questions following up that, but I do have to go really soon. I do apologize. So, yeah, I'm gonna bow out. But yeah, this has been a fascinating conversation.
It has
really
been
interesting.
I appreciate all that. I appreciate all the pushback too. This is what's missing from my streams. Usually it's just me, and maybe that's because I piss people off. But usually it's just me playing in my own sandbox and people watching me play in the sandbox. I bring chat in as much as I can to make it, to keep it inclusive and to make it not be all about my ideas. But it's so much better on a stream to have other people contributing and pushing back and challenging and asking for clarifications and sharing their own ideas.
You gotta learn to argue with yourself.
Right.
Yep.
Well, I could try that more.
Go insane.
Well,
or maybe you become sane.
Sure.
Sane is not a diagnosis in the DSM-5, nor will it be in the 6. Okay, thanks for your time, Mark.
Right.
So thank you, Mark.
Well, I mean, I have some thoughts on mental illness. I'll just say a quote that I heard from I can't remember his name, but it was a real intelligent thinker from India. He said that it is no measure of sanity to be well adjusted to a completely insane world. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said. Right. So. The whole idea is if you go through some kind of trauma and you're not well adjusted to it, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. That's perfectly expected. And so, as I sign off with, be kind to yourself and each other.
Awesome.
Definitely. Yeah. So I'll leave you with that.
Being kind to yourself is being kind to others.
Yeah, in a certain roundabout way, sure. But I'm just going to repeat myself because it's what I do. But thanks, guys. It was wonderful. So thank you so much, and I will see you
Bye.
later.
Sleep well.
See ya.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks again to Mark for his participation. That was really interesting, thought provoking, and lovely. And that is what I want here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
want I'm drunk.
Let's not single people out now. I know what
Yeah,
that meant.
sorry.
Yeah. I just felt bad for that one guy, but yeah, I'm glad we're past that. So I just want to say hi.
I want to vouch, James, that there are moments of extreme clarity where that individual can be brilliant.
Oh, I believe you. Some people are really good at being drunk. In fact, one of Godless Girl's most epic wins in a debate was when she was passed out drunk, and her debate opponent thought he was getting one over on her because she basically passed out, and then as soon as he was done, she sat straight up, absolutely eviscerated him, and then passed out again.
I have some okay, I don't have respect for the lack of self-control of the individual. However, in Godless Girl, I see brilliance. I really do.
She is.
Now, I think it might be even some form of escapism, or it could be honesty, to say something like, "I hold no positions," and can argue from whatever I find is wrong with your position instead. And that might be some kind of protective mechanism, and might be held as honest. I can't really tell. But that's the only thing that I have to say I object to in Godless Girl. Hey, look, it's Wes. Peace and respect, Wes. Haven't seen you in a coon's age, as they say.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Wes. And everybody else in chat that I haven't had a chance to say hello to. It's been great having you guys all here. And I've been following it, including all the stuff that wasn't even on topic. I've been following all of it, but it's always interesting.
Well, I'm going to call it a day because this is 2.5, and I usually try to cut them off at 1. But the conversation was such that it stayed upbeat and kept snapping. But Midnight had almost no floor space. So I want to put all the pressure on you to perform instantly, and also don't stutter. Oh, and could you sing us a song while you're at it? And how about some nice soft shoe? If you want, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you, Richard, you big, beautiful, gay bastard. Although I don't think you're gay, but thank you anyway.
No, I take it as a compliment either way.
Oh yeah. Okay, LSD. I mean, I've always, James and I have had this conversation months ago, to where we talked about how and there's a stuttering, how each one of us is basically, we are individuals, but that individual is basically an illusion, an illusion created through our interactions with other people. Like every time you talk to somebody, you have a conversation with somebody, they're giving you a piece of themselves, and you're giving them a piece of yourself. Right? It's just one of those things where we either tear each other down or raise each other up. Right? It's really amazing, the discoveries they've made regarding human interaction, and how that could either make or break us. Right? In healthy positive relationships, your immune system is actually strengthened. Right? They've actually done studies to where they've noticed that that having positive attitude, having a good supportive system, along with doing physical work and brain work, you know what I mean? Can definitely help us. Be live happier, fully enriching lives. Now, of course, today, in today's world, like, we may be more connected, but we are definitely more alone than we've ever been, which is ironic. Because there is that connection missing from people's lives. I mean, you could find friends online that you can connect with, and I have. Uh, but yeah, I think psychology is awesome, and anyone who thinks otherwise doesn't really understand it. Uh,
Yeah, fair.
Okay, that was a good performance.
We like it.
Feel
So,
free to say it slower next time to give your mouth a chance to catch up with your brain. Not to poke fun at you. I just think it's the case that your mouth can't keep up with your brain.
you're not the only one who said that. I think Odin said that too. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think you're really bright, and I'm not blowing smoke up your butt. I just think I'm stating what the affairs are. I think you're really bright, and you don't give yourself enough time. James, the floor is yours.
oh, well, I just want to thank everybody for their time and patience and contributions. This was such a great stream that I will be favoriting it and sharing it with people that have similar interests because it was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
It, if it had just been me talking, it wouldn't have been half as great. It just wouldn't have been. But between the combination of me and Richard and Mark and then Midnight, like it just was a wonderful experience from beginning to end. And I'm just glad to have been part of it. It was a great way to spend a couple of hours with some really great people.
Well, I want to say that I had the same experience. I mean, from my experience, but very, very similarly. I really enjoyed all of you coming in and having the conversation. Everyone was respectful of each other and loving. And I don't know, try to think of it as a remote hug, you know?
All right.
So thank you all deeply for that. I'm going to go ahead and close out the show. Peace and respect to you all. Wild Hearts, PP, Red Pill Matrix, What the Beck. Look out for number one who just showed up, and you're late, man. And we're wrapping it up, and I'm so sorry. You might, I don't often say this, but you might go back and watch this because it was a really interesting conversation. And I don't normally say that about any conversation I'm in, but there were enough people and enough different minds that I can say that without seeming narcissistic. Let's see. Also, JG for getting this kick-started. I really appreciate that. Producer Wes, Housonic Kaiju, and I'm going to forget names, Red Pill Religion, Theological Introspection, Peter W., Hillary's emails. Oh, gosh, Harpo Blues dropped by. Thanks a lot, guys. Please, before I close this out, please take a moment and vote on the video. I don't care if you vote up or down. But somehow to whatever kind of mathematical equation it matters whether or not you did. Thank you everyone who attended and participated, either spoken or written, and anyone who might watch this in the future human. I want you to know you have my extension of my peace and respect from me. Thank you all very much, and I want you all to know that I truly do look forward to the day that we're all great friends. Till next time.